All right, well, good morning, everybody. I am standing in for Tiffany, who is still greeting everyone following the 9 o'clock service. Welcome this morning to the third week of our Summer Mission Forum. This morning, Stephanie Green will be hosting our three guests. So, Stephanie, I'll pass it to you, and actually, I'll give you the mic, because Stephanie has the mic already. But welcome, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest, and thank you for all of your technological support, Mr. Clark. Thank you again. My name is Stephanie Green, and I'm happy to welcome everyone here and everyone online. For the past few years, I've had the pleasure of chairing our Creation Care Committee. Thank you, Laura. And for those of you who don't know, our Creation Care Committee is our environmental stewardship, conservation, and animal welfare committee, and we've done a number of projects, which I'm very proud of. We can talk more about that later. But this morning, we have three very distinguished leaders in these areas, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce them now, and then we'll have a really fun conversation about what they're doing, how you can help, and what the future holds for these organizations. So I'll begin with my friend Lindsay Milstein, who's at the very end. Lindsay is the president and CEO of Dumbarton Oaks Park Conservancy, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with right here in Georgetown. She has served as a DOPC board member since 2012 and as president since 2014. She works in public-private partnerships with the National Park Service and works to engage citizen support for the restoration and improved management of Dumbarton Oaks Park, again, here in Georgetown. Mark, good morning. Mark Hudson has served as the executive director of Tudor Place Historic House and Garden since October 2015. In that role, he has led planning and project initiatives to promote sustainability, inclusion, and stewardship of Tudor Place's architecture, collections, and landscapes. Welcome, Mark. Katie, here is Katie Rochemel, is the Director of Institutional Giving at Humane Rescue Alliance. She began working as the organization's Director of Community Programs in 2018, where she oversaw the Help Out, Partner, and Engage program, the Safe Haven program, and the Community Cat program. Our dogs welcome you as well. And I'm very happy to say that Katie is one of our mission grant recipients, so she's going to talk more about that in a few minutes as well. So welcome all, and I'll start with Lindsay. She's got the microphone. Just tell us, Lindsay, what's going on at Dumbarton Oaks and a little bit of history and the basics about what we need to know about what you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me. Dumbarton Oaks Park is the wild garden portion of Dumbarton Oaks, and Dumbarton Oaks was, the inception of design was 101 years ago, and it was designed over the course of 20 years by Beatrix Farrand in partnership with Mildred Bliss. Robert and Mildred Bliss were the owners of the Country Era estate, and Mildred and Beatrix worked over 20 years to design the formal and wild gardens. In 1940, they gifted the formal gardens to Harvard, Robert's alma mater, and the wild garden to the people of the United States under the management of the National Park Service. And well, that was a celebratory moment. It fell into disrepair for lack of management and care over time. And in the last 80 years or so, there have been community efforts to recognize that beautiful space for what it is. It's a historic cultural landscape that many of us find great moments in. And then in 2010, Dumbarton Oaks Park Conservancy was formed to restore, promote, and maintain the park and reunify the understanding of that design, both the historic, the cultural, and the living landscape now that's so essential to our green spaces in the urban core of Georgetown and the city. So there's a ton of beautiful stories that I'm sure, Mark, you too have to share about the space, but there's some basics about this wonderful little pocket of green, kind of a secret garden here in the neighborhood.
Do we have any pictures we can pull up, Ernest?
No, regrettably.
Okay. All right.
There's
Well,
some technical challenges.
Maybe they will come later. Maybe they'll come later. Okay. So, Mark, can you do the same? Kind of give us an overview of Tudor Place and what you're working on in conservation?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. I'm the executive director of Tudor Place Historic House and Gardens. We're right here in Georgetown. We have 5.5 acres right up 31st Street here. And we have a long association with Christ Church, with family members of the Peter family being members of the congregation here, and we've hosted events for Christ Church on the site as well. But our mission is to tell the stories of 6 generations of the Peter family who were descendants of Martha Washington, but also to tell the stories of the enslaved and free people who lived and worked at the site. And increasingly that is a focus of our work in thinking about our organization's inclusivity and everything that we do, but particularly our interpretation and the tour that we provide to people. And we accomplish this mission through activities that are geared toward preservation, toward the education, rejuvenation, getting people into the gardens for a moment of quiet, and with community engagement and all of those things. Conservation is really embedded into all of those things. Oh, great. There are pictures up now. And so when we talk about conservation at Tudor Place, it's really around the architecture, the collections, and the landscapes. And a lot of this is guided by direction that we got from the person we consider our founder, Armistead Peter III, who was the final private owner of Tudor Place, who really created the mechanisms for Tudor Place to become a historic house, museum, and a historic garden. And he did that with three different things. First was the creation of the foundation itself, the Tudor Place Foundation that he created in 1966. And then what this image is showing, and also in 1966, he conveyed a preservation easement to the U.S. government through the Department of the Interior. This is the actual event when they were signing the easement in December of 1966, and that's Secretary of the Interior Stuart Udall on the right, and saying this easement will ensure that its dignity and beauty will be preserved unimpaired for future generations. And so this idea of longevity and Tudor Place being around in perpetuity was provided to us through this easement and through the will of Armistead Peter III. And you go to the next image. So when he died in 1983, he left to us the grounds, the house, all of the collections, about 15,000 objects inside. And there's a lot of consideration for the care and conservation of the grounds. And one of the things that he directed us to do in particular was to ensure that Tudor Place was a haven or a refuge for the rabbits and squirrels and the birds. And so a lot of the work that we do is geared toward that as well. So we can go on to the next. So some of the things that we do with respect to the care of the landscapes. One of the things we've been doing for about the last 5 years, we're beekeepers, and so we have a lot of pollination activities going on the site. We are careful about what we plant, promoting really the installation only of native plants or plants that are appropriate for this environment, and then being thoughtful about how we remove the undesirable invasive plants. Last week we had a weed pull. We had about 15 people come, and they helped us remove porcelain berry and some of these other invasive plants on the site as well. So we don't use herbicides, we don't use insecticides, things like that. We try to manage the site in a very natural way. And a special consideration for the trees as well. So we work with different types of arborists to really monitor the health of all the trees on the site. We do remedial treatments when we need to. And large trees like this is the tulip poplar that's on the south lawn. It's an amazing specimen. If you haven't seen it, you should. The large trees like this are outfitted with lightning protection. So there actually is a cable that runs all the way into the ground from the top of those trees as well. So the trees are given special consideration, and when a tree does die, and they do, we replace it with the same variety. We were talking earlier though about some of the challenges that we have. Armistead Peter told us in his will, if a plant dies, replace it with the same thing. However, he was very fond of ornamentals from Asia and things like that that are not suited for the environment here. And so we have to make some thoughtful decisions as far as respecting his wishes and doing what we consider to be best for the site. And conservation factors into our long-term planning as an organization as well. So we have a master preservation plan for the site that outlines particular activities and projects that are promoting this idea of sustainability and conservation, and really thinking about conservation in the broadest sense as well. So being good neighbors, being good citizens of our planet, and doing things that are promoting that. So this is a project we engaged in 2019 to install cisterns. These are 16,000 gallon cisterns that are planted beneath the south lawn, and they catch the rainwater that comes off of the roof of the main house, and then these are tied into our irrigation system, and we use that for watering the lawn. So it does two things. It arrests runoff that was happening off of the site, which was carrying parts of Tudor Place on downstream, but it also conserves water, and so that the water that we're using for the lawn there is this recycled resource as well. And then larger projects as well. So an expansion and renovation of our garage facility is going to incorporate geothermal energy, planting about 30 wells that are 300 to 500 feet deep as a way of both extracting heat and sinking heat for the environmental control systems in the facilities as well. I do have information back on the table about the master preservation plan if you're interested in a little booklet, our case for support. And then the last part of this that I would just mention too is the work that we do in public education around this, particularly with schools, scout groups, and with adult groups as well. And the idea here is really to create a love of and an understanding of the natural environment, and to share with people ideas of ways that they can use these ideals in their own backyards, in their own lives, but also really using our gardens as an outdoor classroom, if you will, for promoting some of these ideas and ideals. So that's what I have.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mark. So Katie, tell us about what you're doing at the Humane Rescue Alliance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for having me here. So Humane Rescue Alliance, you may have seen us on the road or around. We serve for this DC's animal care and control primarily, which means we are the animal shelter. Any animal related issues in the city, that is our team of folks who are going to help respond, solve, mediate, whatever that may be. So a couple weeks ago there was a black bear in Brookland, and that was our team that went out to coordinate the tranquilizing that bear and helping relocate it. So really kind of gives you the idea of like, there's a stray dog, there's a black bear, we're there for it either way. So I like to talk a little bit about our organization as a somewhat bifurcated. So on the one side, I guess let me go back to the history. We came in 1870, we were congressionally chartered, so we've been around, this is the 153rd year for us. It was the Washington Humane Society for the Prevention of Cruelty of Animals. And then in 2016, there were two separate organizations that merged. Both of them were two nonprofits doing a bit of the same type of work in DC, the Washington Humane Society and the Washington Animal Rescue League. Washington Animal Rescue League has also been around for a long time, so we merged into one, and we are now Humane Rescue Alliance. So folks who have been around for a while may call us the Washington Humane Society or the Humane Society. That's us. Still the same organization, but this merge of two different nonprofits into one. So long legacy in the community of doing this type of work. Okay, so now talking about today. Again, a little bit kind of bifurcated. On one side, we are helping with any homeless animals in that very traditional sense of sheltering. So anything regarding strays on the street that people find or animal control brings in, to surrenders of animals into our shelter, to adopting those animals out, to finding foster families in the community. Those are kind of all traditional sheltering roles, and we do all of that. And then the other side of what you're seeing up here is all of our community programming that we have in place to help pet owners keep their pets out of our shelters and into their loving homes. So there's a really big focus on pet retention and family preservation. We see that pets, and we're not just cats and dogs, we are all the animals. Even at the shelter, if you want to adopt a bunny, please come adopt a bunny. We have tons of them.
Even
we
snakes.
Snakes, everything. If it's a legal pet to have in DC, it will come through our shelter at some point. And yes, we are bursting at the seams with bunnies and guinea pigs right now. So, think of us before going to the pet store to purchase an animal. So this family preservation work, and that is the work that the St. Francis Guild has supported for many years. We're super grateful to you all, the congregation, for helping support this work. It is basically we're helping people and using the animals as the conduit to help these people. It is very people-centric in every way. So we have programs such as vaccine clinics that we hold, pet vaccine clinics that we hold in the community. The focus is very largely on Anacostia, so wards 7 and 8. And we have these vaccine clinics where they are kind of community events. They are a joyous occasion. People come with their pets to get them vaccinated. They also get, toys and treats and all other kinds of supplies for their pets. And it is trying to meet folks where they are in the community, especially in areas where the need is highest. We have this deep focus in Anacostia because it is an absolute pet resource desert, which means currently there are 0 vets operating for the entire community of Anacostia east of the river. There was one part-time vet who just finally, she had been, for a long time, she had been saying she may retire, and she finally said, I'm done. And so since she has closed her doors, there are 0 vets. That means that our team is coming in to do our best to find ways to help pet owners in that neighborhood specifically. So we're doing that through a variety of ways. One, like I said, these vaccine clinics. For a long time, we've had free spay-neuter services for pets for folks living with low incomes. That's available for any DC resident. But again, really hyper-focused in that particular Ward 7 and 8 area. We've also just created a pilot program this year of having a field veterinarian embedded in our field services, which means she makes house calls. This is a pretty critical and new development for us because a lot of times you have animal control or humane law enforcement. Again, those are our folks. They will speak with a pet owner about a situation that may seem like abuse or neglect, but it's not always that clear, right? It's something like an ear infection or matting. A lot of dogs get matting because they're not groomed regularly, especially certain breed of dogs. And that matting, if left for a while, can become worse and worse and become a much more dire situation. It's not always a situation of just neglect, right? It's folks who don't have a car. How are they? There's not a single groomer in that entire area, so you can think of the challenges that people are dealing with. And so instead of kind of taking that animal from them and admonishing them, we work with them through both education. This dog is this type of breed. We need to have it groomed regularly. Here's how you do it. And then also having our field vets go visit, talk them through, do the shave down in that one moment, give vaccines, do whatever it is to kind of set that pet owner up for success of keeping that animal with them. Another program that we launched last year that has grown exponentially in the last year and a half has been our Treat to Return program. So this is for folks who are dealing with a veterinary crisis. They may take their animal to a vet and they may be quoted, $3,000, and they certainly do not have that to save their animal. And so they come to us thinking it's their last resort to surrender their animal to us. traditionally, the pathway for those animals would be, we would take them into the shelter, we would fix them up, we would adopt them out. There is no reason to do that entire process at the end of adopting them out when there's an existing family that loves this animal. We are going to treat that animal regardless. So it's a matter of returning that animal to its loving home, keeping it out of our shelter. So it works on both sides. One of the major challenges that we are facing this year in particular, and this is a national crisis, is that adoptions are dramatically down with shelters and rescues across the whole nation. And we are for sure feeling that and seeing that. This means longer length of stay for animals, which impacts behavior, impacts health, impacts everything, impacts our staff, impacts our resources. That means that a dog in the past, especially a large dog, that's our most vulnerable population of animals, because they tend to sit with us for a much longer amount of time than any other population of animal, and while they're with us, they deteriorate. So in the past, a large dog may have been with us for about 7 days-ish. Now the average is about a month to 2 months, and that's just an average. We have many dogs who've been with us in the shelter for 6-7 months or longer. The shelter is a very stressful environment. As much as we provide enrichment for those animals to try to decrease the stress, just inherently it is a stressful environment. So we are always looking for foster families to help keep animals out of the shelters, and as the moment a kennel space is cleared, that means another animal can be in that spot. So we're kind of, like I said, we're doing all of this work and trying to take a much more holistic approach of family dynamics, of pet flow, of how, animals that do come into our shelter, we want the animals that come to our shelter to kind of be a last resort situation. The flow of animal through the sheltering system, so that means engaging foster families in the community and getting adopted, and so that means getting animals into families as soon as possible and providing resources for those families if they need them. I think that's the bulk.
Tell us about your grant that you received from the Mission Grants Committee and how you've been able to use it and how we've helped you.
Yeah, so the Mission Grant has been really associated with this kind of community program work that I was talking about. So everything from helping support these vaccine clinics to our pet pantry program. It's another program that we have that we provide about 2 weeks worth of pet food for pet owners who express the need. Again, any DC resident that says they have the need, we don't do income checks for that. For example, we saw a big spike in our pet pantry in the government shutdown a few years ago. So people come to us at all different points of their life. Our Safe Haven program is another program where that was originally intended and set up for folks who are dealing with domestic violence. If they are fleeing their abuser and they need somewhere to safely tuck their animals while they kind of get themselves on their feet, get themselves situated, get a home that will be safe and appropriate for them and their pet, we will board their animal for free for a few months while they're doing that and then reunite them. And what else? And then the free spay-neuter program. And so again, that's for folks who are largely in Wards 7 and 8 that get a pet. They don't acquire it through us because every animal we send out for cats, dogs, and bunnies will come spayed and neutered already before it's put into a home. So if they've acquired a pet some other way, there's a lot of folks who acquire, say, cats or kitten from, someone, there was a cat in the neighborhood that had kittens, and they bring a kitten in as a pet. So we will help get that animal spayed and neutered. So these are largely the community programs that the grant has been helping support this year and in previous years. And then with that funding, we've been able to kind of continue creating a much larger scope. So that was that Treat to Return program that we've instituted last year and our field vet program this year. So it is, as I said, it's kind of almost like our resources are half and half at this stage. And through those grants and through those funding, we're able to keep putting that emphasis on keeping animals in their existing homes, out of the shelter, and providing support, education, resources, whatever that may be, for pet owners so that they can be set up for success.
And how many dogs approximately do you have at the moment who need homes?
Several hundred.
Several hundred.
Several hundred,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Our intake each year annually is in the vicinity of of all animals, not wildlife. We do respond to wildlife, but we don't count those in our intake numbers. I want to say in the vicinity of 5 to 10,000 every year. So it's a lot of animals that come our way. Like I said, if it's an animal in DC, whether it's supposed to be a pet or not, we will take it. If we get something in like an alligator, which we do occasionally, we obviously won't adopt that out. We will find an appropriate sanctuary. We have relationships with all kinds of sanctuaries for animals that are not quite appropriate pets. But if it is an animal that's adoptable, we will adopt it out in the area. And you do not have to be a DC resident to adopt, or to foster, or to donate. So,
Cool. Well, Lindsay, I'd like to hear about some of your community programs. Let's pass the microphone down to you. Which is your favorite, and what are you working on this year?
They're all my favorite.
Yeah.
We have a volunteer program where volunteers come into the park and help in the restoration process wherever we're at. Stormwater triage, transitioning meadows to warm season native grass meadows, planting the Stream Valley corridor, removing invasive plants. And we're about 100,000 volunteer hours into the project. Community members from throughout greater Washington area come in, both locally, corporations, youth groups, schools. So the volunteer program, it's twice monthly on the weekends, and then during the week, groups come in. And I've been doing that my whole life, so it's a boots on the ground exercise of knowing, learning, reading the landscape, and being within it. And it's so restorative for both the land and the people dedicating their time to it. So that's a fabulous piece of our project. And it's brought us a long way and leveraged every dollar fourfold. So that's the volunteer program. And then we have a Leave No Child Inside program. I co-founded that in 2014, and it's got a blossoms and bloomers from birth to 3, and our local play groups participate in that. We've got one this Friday. It's like off the hook. That one's really fun. But to be a part of a child's formative experience in green space is like a very, very enriching honor. And then a series of other programs that reach underserved youth from throughout DC, including Wards 7 and 8. We work with DC Public Schools, and the Explorers Program and Landscape by Design, which is a keystone program for us in partnership with the National Park Service. We took an Olmsted-based program and adapted it to Beatrix Farrand and delivered that to middle school students, and then developed it further for high school students receiving their GEDs. They come into the park, they have boots on the ground experiences, engaging in sustainable practices and restoration. And then throughout the pandemic, we did hybrid programming, asynchronous programming, synchronous programming. We hand delivered materials, and then we taught them about the integrated management approach of how to care for spaces like this, our democratic spaces, our green spaces, whether you're a hydrologist or an engineer or a landscape architect, and learning those early tools, learning that these fields exist at all, and that they might come into their thinking as a part of a future that they could invest in, that they could bring all of who they are into this space. A fun piece that we like to bring up, to make sure that they bring everything that they are into that room. We talk about how nature is inspiration. Just being in that space is lending an act of volunteerism and stewardship, as turning your attention to that space. And then if your passion is music, well, Igor Stravinsky created a concerto. If your passion is painting, Ernest Clegg did a beautiful painting. And then taking it into our more modern spaces of understanding. Andy Warhol, which might be a more familiar name to some, he said, nature is the greatest work of art. And there's millions and millions of examples of how to bring all of who you are into that space. And we work really hard to create that platform so that people can really find that respite and repose. And those are 2 programs. There's Art in the Park. Raymond Caskey, who did the World War II memorial, memorial wreaths. He did a beautiful site-specific piece that we hope to install in the Gray Arbor Memorial at the heart of the park in 2024. It's called Arcadia. It's a bronze relief, and it's exquisite, and it's sort of, the message through this piece is sort of time out of time. I mean, the living garden and that sort of transition over time. We had some photos, but not here today, so technology again. But there's a few programs that are kind of at the core of our work now.
And I'm going to ask all of you the same question, but let's start with Lindsay and then we'll turn it over to questions. What is your biggest challenge at the moment, and how can we as parishioners and stewards of conservation help you? How can we make a direct impact on what you're doing?
Well, the biggest challenge that this public-private partnership faces right now, in terms of the site itself, is still the impact of stormwater from the Whitehaven West entrance over off of Wisconsin. There's significant stormwater coming in, since 70% impervious surface has been built up over time. When Farrand initially designed this space, we had a forested green all the way up into Olmsted's space at the National Cathedral, and now that we have these impervious surface corridors, so we've been working fastidiously and making great progress, but that's a big project that's at the forefront of our work in protecting the historic cultural resource and allowing us to invest in restoring the built structures, the 18 designed waterfalls that run through Dumbarton Run, which is a tributary to the Potomac, Rock Creek, and then the Potomac. That's one very big piece of our work that we're right at the precipice of. And then the Leave No Child Inside program. We're a nascent organization, and we've been looking at how to make that program more viable. We've delivered over 60,000 program hours, and we do that by leveraging and having this be a labor of love and a true passion project from the community, but to make that a viable program that can have continued delivery would be great. So there's a couple little pieces. I could go on, but yeah.
We know where to start. Where to start. And tell us just briefly how we go to Dumbarton Oaks, what are your hours, and how do we get in?
So Dumbarton Oaks Park is a federally managed landscape in partnership with Dumbarton Oaks Park Conservancy. And as a familiar, I think we're all fairly familiar with in this country, that dawn to dusk, right? So these spaces are not gated typically or locked, but the way that they're interacted with is they're open at dawn and closed at dusk. To get to it, it's not very well, there's not a lot of signage, so there is a bit of discovery. And there's some wonderful beauty in that. You go down into the valley and then a cathedral of trees, and you find something there, you find place. And I think as we look to create signage and make it more visible, we still want to protect that intimate aspect of the design and discovery of the space. But it is right at about 31st and R, and there's a long swing gate down a, what road? Yeah, well, it's Lover's Lane, but it's not signed. It's a maintenance road, basically. It's a paved maintenance road, so a large swing gate and on it is a wooden sign that says Dumbarton Oaks Park, open dawn to dusk. And that's one way in, but there are 3 entrances. You can get in off Mass Ave, you can get in off of R Street, and you can get in off of Wisconsin. and there's also another Whitehaven entrance. And these are all non-historic entrances that lead into the historic park. So there's an aspect of accessibility that we've been working on with the Institute for Human-Centered Design, both in addressing access to the site physically and then beyond that programmatically and interpretively and digitally, so that we have inclusive access to the space and make it more visible. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mark, same question. What are your challenges? How can we help you? And how can we come to Tudor Place?
We have no challenges. Everything's great.
Perfect.
I think one of the things that continues to be a challenge for us, and some of it I think is because of some of the inherent characteristics of the estate itself, is a perception that we are elite, that we are exclusive, and that the public is not welcome at Tudor Place. And so to address some of those things, we engaged in the past couple of years in what's called a community and audience assessment that we did with the American Alliance of Museums. And it was an opportunity for us to learn some things about ourselves as an organization, and also thinking about who we want to be. But it also was a way for us to look at our community, both demographically, but in other ways as well, and to engage and to hear from people. And that was one of the things that we continue to hear, is that, and a lot of people, it's kind of like, well, I'm speaking for a friend. Tudor Place is exclusive. And so, how do we break down those barriers? And we learned it's a lot more than marketing. I mean, that's part of it, how you message, how you describe what you're doing, how you extend invitations to people. But it's also for us about who we are and the content and programming that we're delivering as well. And so we have always, but I think more in a very concentrated way in the past couple of years, have been putting a great emphasis upon an inclusive story of Tudor Place. So it's not simply the story of the 6 generations of wealthy Peter family members, but also the enslaved and free people who lived and worked there, and incorporating that into our programming. Our lecture series this year is really focused upon the research that we're doing to tell the story of the enslaved at Tudor Place, but really just some things that are much more inherent as well, just our overall interpretation of the site and how we think about ourselves. One of the products of this assessment, this community and audience assessment that we did, we realized we can't be all things to all people as much as we want to. And so the focus of that was to define particular communities and think about how do we engage with them, and understanding community engagement to be very much a two-way street. It's we listen to the community and understand what their wants and needs are, and try to address those, but also with audiences as well. And some of that is about marketing and outreach and things like that, but really defining and understanding who we want to serve, who we can serve, and then how do we have an inclusive message that makes it really clear to people that we want you here. We want you to have this experience. I think one of the interesting outcomes of the pandemic for us has been, and I think this kind of relates to the ideals of conservation, is how we are thinking about the 5.5 acres of gardens and grounds that we have, but also how the public is thinking about it and using it as well. So for the 5 months of 2020 that we were open to the public, it was just the gardens, and people started using the site very differently than they had. Rather than, I'm going to come get a tour of the house and I'll wander around the gardens for a few minutes afterward, they were coming and spending the whole day with us and having a picnic and we went, yeah, this is, and so we're really trying to promote that as well in how we talk to people about the site and how we encourage people to come. And we're really seeing more of that. Right now, our garden visitation is far exceeding the house tours, and the house tours are at capacity. So we've really seen a rebound generally, but a lot of it's about just perceptions and encouraging people to see us in a different way.
Thank you. Katie, challenges and how can we help you?
Simple. No, I mean, we deal with life and death every day at our organization. That's just a matter of the work that we do. But as I mentioned before, our biggest challenge is really that we are in a dire space crisis for our animals, and our call to action for the community is to adopt, to foster, and to donate, because this crisis is such an incredible drain on resources, everything from financial resources to staff mentality. It's very, very taxing work to be in animal welfare, especially when things are not going smoothly. Nobody gets into the field because they want to see animals suffer, right? Everyone gets in the field that's drawn to it is because they feel quite the opposite. So it's very hard to see, for example, dogs languish at the shelter and stuff like that. So that is our call to action to our community, is to adopt, to foster, and to donate.
Love it. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're going to take some questions. I'll pass the mic around if anyone has any questions for Lindsay, Mark, or Katie. Questions? Take Tiffany. There you go.
Katie, I wanted to thank you for what you're doing, I think, because our son brought home one of your dogs last Christmas, and we love her, and I also hate her, and I love her. But I was and actually he was informed when he chose her, after he did, that she was just a few days from being put down, just because no one was taking her home and that you were at capacity. And I was just wondering if there are certain trends that you've noticed in society right now that are causing this, or did you already say this? Did I miss this? A sudden influx of so many animals that aren't being rehoused and that are unwanted.
Yeah, happy to answer that. Just a caveat, I don't have scientific resources to back this up, but anecdotally what we are seeing is the beginning of the pandemic, there was this great rush. There was a call to action to the community, please come empty the shelter at the beginning of the pandemic, because people were home. It was an opportune time to take an animal into your life, whatever species animal that was. And so we, again, and this is also in national standards throughout the whole nation, shelters were having this wonderful surge of adoptions to clear their shelters, which was amazing. However, as things started opening back up, a couple things we noticed through that process. So folks' lives were going back to what it may have been pre-pandemic, which may mean they're going back into work or going off to school, whatever that could be, and they're feeling that their time and resources are therefore limited because they're not around like they were. Another thing that happened, unfortunately, is through the pandemic, a lot of people acquired animals, especially dogs, that they couldn't socialize properly. In the beginning in 2020, everything was closed. It was very hard to do proper socialization, especially if you got, say, a puppy, to do dog-to-dog socialization. You didn't have people coming and going in your home, and so now your animal may have serious stranger danger mentality, whatever it may be. And so there's a big rise of behavioral issues, a big rise in medical issues. It was very hard to get vet care, not just because in the beginning things may have been closed, but because of the surge, vet care prices increased. It was impossible to get into the door. And then a lot of people acquired animals on their own that, again, may not have had spayed or neutered, and so those animals then had babies, and so there are just more animals out there. So it's kind of this perfect storm, I think, that is inherently tied to the pandemic, where we just kind of see this arc of up and then crash, and now we are in the thick of it. And so this is just something that we need to work through as a society, as a culture. Conversely, the positive thing about that is, culturally speaking, you know, our stance is that animals should not be seen as a luxury, that they are part of a family, and many people, that no one should be denied the human-animal bond if that is something that they choose to have in their life. There is scientific research on the health benefits of having a pet in your life. And so we have seen just across our culture as a norm that folks are becoming accepting of that folks are fighting for that they want to have a pet. It is not across any socioeconomic level, people will choose to have a pet. So I think that there is a much greater acceptance that animals are part of the family. They're not, you know, a working creature. They are loved on, they are doted on to the level that the folks can give them, and they are seen as part of the structure of the family. So there is kind of that positive side of our cultural shift.
Laura has a question, and then the lady behind Laura.
Hello, this is for all of our lovely panelists. Thank you for being here today. And certainly, I know I am a patron and have donated to some of your organizations. I encourage others to do the same. But I think we all, whether our means are limited or not, we all care and want to be there in person to have direct impact. Volunteers are sometimes a blessing and a curse, because then you need volunteer coordinators to keep them, you know, productive and happy. So my question is, what is the one misperception about volunteers, why you need them or why you don't in the field? What do you wish we all knew that we might not already?
We couldn't do what we do without volunteers. It has to be a good fit for you. So I'm always looking to bring out the best in whoever wants to come into the room and raise what they have to offer even higher. So just finding a fit. I mean, there's pro bono volunteering, there's board volunteering, there's you know, garden volunteering, there's for an organization such as ours, it's across the boards in all regards, inside and out. And there is an issue with capacity and being able to bring people into the culture of the organization and have them feel connected to it. And I find that the best way to do that is to make sure that that person, if possible, is willing to come into the park and really steep themselves in that space, because it's the narrative, it's the story, it's the bond that kind of brings us all together. And there's so much more. There's books and movies and all kinds of great stuff from there. But if we have that kind of common ground, it kind of goes from there. So, you know, that's it.
Well, I think as far as misconceptions or misperceptions that people may have, it's that the volunteers are extra, and like you, we can't do what we do without our volunteers. A majority of the tours that we give to the public are given by docents who are volunteers. Much of the extra work that goes into keeping our gardens looking great and being healthy is done by volunteers. And so I think that's one of the things that is important that we message in encouraging people to be volunteers, but also to the volunteers we currently have, is just we can't do this without you. But that idea of finding the right fit, and I think particularly for us with the docents, it's a large commitment of time up front to learn the history of the site, to learn the techniques for sharing that on a tour, and then to continue to work with the staff in developing those skills. And it's not for everyone. And so finding that right match and that right fit, and finding the right ways to prepare people for these experiences can be a challenge, but it's they clearly are a blessing to us, and as to something that people can do if you're interested. We would love to talk to you about being a volunteer with us.
Like them, volunteers are the lifeblood of our organization. We have about 150 staff members, and I would say it's probably 3 to 4 times that volunteers. So we couldn't do it. The big challenge is inherent risk. If you're going to come in and work with animals, you're working with animals. And so the way that we work with that is training, getting people to various levels of training so that they have different levels of comfort around, whatever the behavioral issue may be of an animal. That said, of course, we have volunteer opportunities across the entire organization. So things like that vaccination clinic, usually they're just about 2 staff members that are paid to be there, and everyone else is volunteering, included, some staff volunteer for that. So there are opportunities across the board, and yeah, we need you. The one thing I will say is we do ask for the time commitment in terms of every month. I think it's about 8 hours a month to maintain. So, we're not training someone to be able to handle a dog and then they come once and then they go and then we never see them again. But we also accept that, someone may try it. It's not for them. We get that.
Lady in the back had a question.
Well, you've almost answered my question. I have a godchild who just graduated in pre-vet and is on her way to veterinary medicine. And I was going to ask, how could she volunteer? But I think I have 3/4 of the answer. And I also love your cat dress.
I love it. I have a lot of animal print attire. I can really let it shine in this career. Yes, congratulations to her. That's amazing. There's been a long-standing crisis of shortage of vets and vet techs again across the nation. This is pre-COVID, and then COVID made everything much more complicated. So I'm really excited to hear that. And I always call shelter medicine the equivalent of public medicine. There are a lot of folks that finish their veterinary degree or they get the vet tech certification, whatever it may be, and they want to go into private practice, very similar to Humane, right? It's like private practice and public service. Shelter medicine is kind of like public service. We can't pay what private practice does, and it's also just a very different beast by its nature. High volume, you're not necessarily dealing with, clients, members of the public. It's a very different thing. So if she is interested in volunteering her time in any way, shape, or form, of course, get her in touch. And if she's interested in job hunting with us, boy, that is a great fit. So just kind of keep that open if that's something that she is curious about, because there is a constant need for those positions. And if the position is not open today, it might be open tomorrow. You just don't know. Those are hard positions to retain for a long time.
Thank you. So you're all doing the Lord's work. We thank you very much. Thank you for being here this morning. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. And if anyone would like to help with the Creation Care Committee, again, I'm Stephanie Green. My email is slgreen9577@gmail. We're always looking for activities and things to do. And thank you again for coming. And time to go to church now. Thank you. Happy Sunday.
Thank you.